Rome was the only major superpower at the time, followed by the Persian Emperor was number 2, the Persian Empire. Rome was the greatest superpower, and Jerusalem was its prize, its jewel, and they loved to protect Jerusalem, fortify it. And yet when the Muslims conquered it, unbelievably, Allah Azza wa Jalla's miracles came into play, and they managed to carve out that entire slice of now what is Palestine, and that entire region of Syria. Of course, the battles of Yarmouk and others, I have described them in my seerah lectures. And that is why when the Prophet ﷺ passed away, the Sahaba knew that the number one land that he had wanted was Al-Aqsa. So in the reign of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, the only lands that the Muslims attacked, the only lands that they wanted to conquer in the reign of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was Masjid al-Haram, was Al-Aqsa. And we all know that the victory took place in the very first days of the Khilafah of Umar ibn Khattab. So Umar, after the conquest of Damascus, he commanded Yazid ibn Abi Sufyan to be his governor. As I said, Yazid passed away, and Muawiyah was then placed in charge of Damascus. The Muslims continued marching onwards, conquering a number of key cities of Syria. And again, one by one, as they conquered the cities, the Roman soldiers, the Byzantine soldiers dispersed, and the morale is going down and down, until finally the eye is set on the prize of Jerusalem. Until finally the Muslims are now basically feeling confident enough to go to Jerusalem. And all of these cities are fortresses. They're all within walls upon walls. Jerusalem is no different, and they laid siege to Jerusalem for 4 months. And the same as in Damascus, many small battles and skirmishes took place. And once again, we really don't quite understand, where are the Byzantine armies now? This is Jerusalem. This is the holiest of holy. This is where, according to their beliefs and doctrines, Jesus Christ walked and lived and died and was resurrected. And after 4 months of surrounding Jerusalem, the people of Jerusalem agreed to surrender. But they said, as a token of respect, we want your leader, the Khalifa, to come all the way so we can hand the keys over. Finally, the Bishop of Jerusalem, just like Thomas of Damascus, the Bishop of Jerusalem, his name was Sophronius basically agreed to surrender, but with the condition that the Khalifa himself come to receive the keys of the city. Meaning Umar ibn Khattab has to come, and only then will I surrender. So Khalid ibn Walid wrote a letter back to Umar, and he said, after 4.5 months, they're willing to surrender, but the condition of surrender, you must come, then they will surrender. We're not going to surrender to an army general. We want your leader to come. And so Umar ibn al-Khattab, and this shows you his humility. It shows you how much he loved Al-Aqsa. Umar ibn al-Khattab traveled with himself and his servant, and you all know the story, alternating with one camel or one donkey, they say, alternating and taking turns. They were both dressed the same. They looked outwardly the same. There is no entourage. And the people of Al-Aqsa were shocked. This is your leader, the leader of the new Muslim empire. This is your leader. He looks like a common person. He acts like a common person. And they understood why Allah Azza wa Jalla had blessed the Muslim ummah. It was not because of their military strength. It was not because of their arms. It was not because of their weapons. It was because of true sincerity and humility. The leader is riding a donkey as he comes to accept the keys. And at the time they enter the city, it was the turn of his servant to ride on the donkey. So Umar insisted, no, it's your turn, you're going to be riding. That ikhlas, that humility was the real reason why Al-Aqsa was conquered. And this is demonstrated in the treatment of Umar ibn al-Khattab when he conquered Al-Aqsa. In those days, Al-Aqsa was ruled by the Christians, and they did not allow the Jews to live there. And they desecrated the Jewish holy site, which is called the temple now. They desecrated, this is the Christians of the time. They converted it into a dumpster, into a junkyard. They would throw their najas there because they wanted to show the people, we don't agree with you. We are a different faith. We are the superior religion. When Umar ibn al-Khattab conquered it, and he was given a tour of the city, he went to visit the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is the famous church of Al-Aqsa of Jerusalem. And the pastor, the minister said, you may pray your salah over here, the famous example that took place when it was time for Asr. And Umar said, if I pray here, my later followers are going to destroy this church out of respect to me and build a masjid here. I don't want to do that. I will pray outside of the church. He wanted to protect the future of the holiest site of Christianity. Think about that. This is the leader of the Muslim ummah. is saying, I want to protect your church. I don't want some fanatics to come later on and use an excuse. Umar prayed here, so this is our land. No, I'm not going to pray here. So he walked outside, 20 meters away, 100 feet away. He went outside, and to this day, the Masjid of Umar is 100 feet away from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. If you walk from the Holy Sepulchre to Masjid Umar, you will have to walk up and down and go and pray where Umar radiallahu anhu prayed. And again, these are legends and stories, and it seems to be true that the Patriarch was so impressed with Umar's attitude and demeanor and akhlaq that he handed the keys of the church over to Umar for safekeeping. That now that Umar is the Khalifa, he is the boss basically, so the Patriarch hands the keys of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre over. And Umar handed it to one of the local army basically commanders, and it remains in his family to this day, so the legend goes. So again, this seems to be true as well, that to this day the keys to this holiest of holy shrines in Christianity is in the hands of a Muslim. So again, it's very interesting, mashallah, that we have the keys of the holiest church in Christianity still in the hands of a Muslim who Umar ibn al-Khattab handed it to after so many years. And by the way, there's also a quirk here that the Christians like it this way. Why? Because the Christian denominations are fighting with one another, and there's tensions, and even there's small areas. Each one is assigned, this is the Greek Orthodox, this is the Russian guys, these are Armenians guys, these are the Catholics and whatnot. So who amongst them would have the key? So it would cause civil war. So to give it to a third party, the Muslims, solves the problem for the Christians. And it is, again, قدر الله, يعني Allah Azza wa Jal decreed this, and it is for everybody's advantage to this day. Then he asked, after that he finished, and he said, where is the temple location? Where is the mount that was considered to be the original place of Haykal of Sulaiman? And they told him where it was, and he saw it had trash, it had junk, it had garbage. And the Khalifa of the Muslims, the ruler of the Muslims, he with his own hands began picking up that trash and that dirt and cleaning the holy land that belonged to the Yahud. Why? Because in our tradition we respect Isa and we respect Musa. In our tradition we love Sulaiman and Dawood alayhi salam. And what was made holy in their time, we consider holy to this day. The Khalifa of the Muslims began cleaning up the area that was sacred to the Yahud. Think about that. Anybody who says that there was tension between Islam and Judaism is ignorant of history. Anybody who says there was animosity between Muslims and Jews does not know the basics of history. The animosity was only between one faction, we're going to get to that, the Zionist faction, in the last 100 years. Otherwise, historically speaking, Jews always found shelter in Muslim lands every time they were persecuted in Christendom. That is why the largest groups of Jews in the Middle Ages were in Muslim lands, in Turkey, in Iran, in Yemen, in Morocco, North Africa. The largest concentrations of Jews outside in the Middle Ages were always in Muslim lands. Why? Because they fled persecution in Europe and they found shelter in the lands of Islam. Umar ibn al-Khattab and the Khulafa al-Rashidun then opened the door for the Yahud to come and live peacefully in Masjid al-Aqsa. And they continued living peacefully there up until the beginning of this century, when things changed for the worse, as we will come to. And we know that Umar ibn al-Khattab built the first masjid there, and it is called Masjid al-Qibali, which is still standing to this day. Of course not the structure, but the location where he built it is still standing to this day. And the next generation, barely 30 years after Umar al-Khattab had conquered Masjid al-Aqsa, the Umayyad Khalifa Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, he built the Dome of the Rock, which everybody is familiar with. When you see the pictures of Al-Aqsa, you see that beautiful golden dome. Please do not get confused. That dome is the Dome of the Rock. It is not al-Masjid al-Qibali. It is not the masjid built by Umar. That is in front of it. If you're facing the Qibla, towards the back will be the Dome of the Rock, and then the Qibla, you're going to be praying in the original masjid of Umar ibn al-Khattab. Of course, the whole land is sacred. The whole area is sacred, but don't get confused. The Dome of the Rock is not the masjid that is the primary masjid that Umar ibn al-Khattab built. And of course, both of them are considered to be holy. Since that time, up until our time, there have only been 2 periods of history where Al-Aqsa has been taken away from us. For the last 13 and a half centuries, there have only been 2
periods of history where Al-Aqsa has been taken away from us. The first of them was for a period of around 93 years, and that took place in the Middle Ages in the incidents known as the Crusades, when a group of fanatical Europeans left what is now France and England and other places, and they traveled all across the world, and they considered that if they did this journey they would be forgiven. They conquered Jerusalem, and contrast their conquest with Umar ibn al-Khattab. They massacred every single man, woman and child, Muslim and other Christians, because they were one type of Christians. Other Christians were killed, the Arab Christians were killed, and the Jews were massacred. The Crusaders massacred everybody. It is considered to be one of the largest massacres in human history before the advent of the modern world and the modern bombs and whatnot, because they slaughtered people by hand, by literally sword, by killing them one after the other, and up to perhaps 500,000, or some say 750,000 people, the entire city was put to death. And this was the first time since the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab where the majority of inhabitants then became non-Muslims, because they expelled the Muslims from that region. And of course we know Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi's story, and he conquered it in 1187. And we all know when Salah ad-Din conquered it, he protected the Christians, and he allowed them protection. He made sure nobody harmed them as they returned back to Europe, and he then allowed the Arab Christians to come back, and he allowed the Jews to come back again. Subhanallah. Anybody who says that there was tensions between Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, read your history. Religious people who believe in the same God were living together, even if they had different traditions, different prophets. And this is the reality of Jerusalem. Then the second time this land has been taken away from us is in our time frame, and we do not know when we will see the end of this interim. Allah Azza wa Jal has caused us to be living in this generation. This is our qadr of Allah Azza wa Jal, that we have been born when Al-Aqsa does not belong to the Muslims for the second time. But we should all be aware that the notion of creating a Jewish homeland in Palestine is a very modern one. It only goes back around 100 years, 1897. In 1897, a group of intellectual, secular, non-religious Jews, this is a very important point to make. They were not religious people. They were people who didn't really believe in Judaism as